Sophie, welcome to the Democratizing SEO podcast. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time today. You were recommended by someone else I spoke with a couple of weeks ago now, and I want to have a nice, awesome conversation around generative AI impact on technical SEO. And I think you'll be an excellent person to speak with today about this topic. As I like to do with all my SEO guests, I like to ask how they got into SEO in the first place. So with that said, how did you venture into becoming an SEO professional?
Yeah, so I actually started as like a general marketing assistant. So I was doing social media, I was doing emails, just for a really small like retail business. And they'd been a family business, but they didn't have anyone who really knew how to do all of the kind of like online marketing stuff. But they sold online, and it was through kind of the experience of obviously looking at the website, doing like really small bits, but just like looking on analytics. That kind of really got me into the kind of, I didn't even know SEO was a thing for like years. I just read a few
Right.
bits of information, and then I actually went from there into an SEO agency. So I think I just applied to like a general marketing role there, but they were like, when I got there, they explained about what SEO was, and I was like, you know what, I have been using all of these tools that kind of I'm familiar with. And I was like, yeah, it actually sounds really, really fun, kind of like being into that and kind of learning along the way. So I've been agency side ever since. So yeah, for I think the past 4 or 5 years now, I've been SEO agency side. So yeah, it's been really good experience. So slowly going from, I realized from a long time, I really, I don't mind keyword research, it's great, but actually focusing on that technical side, because it's a lot more like problem solving, I kind of started just basically leaning more towards that side of things, which is like how I kind of got into the technical SEO kind of side of stuff.
So technical definitely is your the area that does it for you then.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's just something about I think it's you put like an investigator hat on, like, oh, this is happening. Why is this happening? What's it related to? And it's like you find yourself in a bit of a rabbit hole, and it's just really interesting. And like writing, I've never been great at. So it's like keyword research, writing articles or anything like that. I'm a huge waffler. I'll just type and type, and I really need some good editing and a good editor to work best. So yeah, I was like, I'll stick with the stuff that, that's really interesting and engaging. And I think that's kind of part of moving along in your career, is just finding something that you're really interested in and like pushing down and kind of going into that. It's great knowing everything though. Like, I wouldn't say like try and specialize straight away, but yeah.
Totally agree. I think when starting out, it's nice to have experience across all areas and then narrow down into an area that really like stimulates you, whether it's technical content. Although I have to say, my view on SEO's writing content, I like to say, if one is a writer, that's great. It fits. But trying to get non-writer based SEOs to write content is a huge mistake. And in my opinion,
Yeah.
it's all of that led into Panda that we had many years ago. But that's just my
Oh yeah,
my view on
100%.
it. Oh, you agree with that?
Yeah, and like I said, I can waffle along a lot, and I think having, it's going to be especially important as well. Like you said, mentioning Google algorithms, like it's going to be even more important to have specialized people with the actual real experience to be able to write and edit. But
Yeah.
again, like sometimes it's not necessary, but there's a lot of work that goes into editing and making it readable. And if you've not kind of honed that skill set over time, it can be hard. I feel very sorry for any. So obviously, if I'm writing blog posts for like the agency blog, obviously it's on my specialist subject, but I really feel for the poor editors that have to go through and actually salvage some kind of coherent kind of article out of my waffle. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
always say
not for everyone.
no, it's better for SEOs to work with the different disciplines rather than try to do the different disciplines, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, Google search generative experience. Have you seen a demo of it? It's not yet in the UK, but I'm sure you've seen it either via imagery or like the IO video they had a couple of weeks ago now. What were your thoughts on it?
So yeah, it was really interesting to use because just more for like seeing the thinking behind what they're trying to do. So it's more about, can we summarize stuff? Can we pull out the most interesting parts of the information to actually help facilitate that user journey from point A to point B, discovery, and actually kind of having that process on the SERPs themselves. Although with it being quite early on, I think it's quite, there's a lot of improvements that could be done to make it a bit more kind of useful to people, as well as actually having that SEO benefit, because I think there's a lot of worry that actually it's going to take out so many clicks from the SERPs by being able to summarize the content, that actually having that proper attribution, because there's a lot of expertise that have gone into these kind of pieces of content, and to not get any kind of attribution because it's actually summarizing stuff. I really think they did need to kind of work a bit more on that before it's kind of good enough to can be rolled out fully. But it's really interesting, again, seeing that how Google really want to own that piece of kind of that user experience, own that user journey, and make sure that they can push people along that search journey as smoothly as possible within the SERPs. So it's, asking you to be more specific. It pulls out all the bits of information and creates kind of a summary for someone, so you don't have to dig through hundreds of articles, saving people's time and energy to, again, keep them engaged, because the number one aim of Google, of course, is to provide really great articles and resources for the user, but it's for them to be able to complete a task. They want someone to be able to complete their job with the help of Google. So the more you can do to kind of facilitate that, I think the better.
Mm. Of course, we're still very early on in its. Well, it's not even released yet. It's still in beta in the US. It's not even rolled out across the markets in beta. I'm anticipating it'll be at the earliest a couple of months before it's released, but most likely it's at some point next year. So I'm looking at it as something that's going to be released in a year's time, right? From a tech SEO's point of view, do you have any anticipation of how it will affect technical SEO?
Yeah, so I think that it's going to be really so much more important to have proper structured data behind your pages, because what it's going to need to do is be able to quickly parse all of the content in your articles, on your pages. So I think it's actually technical SEO is going to become a bit more important because you're going to need to have those kind of real solid technical foundations, so that when it's summarizing through the machine learning, it's able to actually get a really quick machine readable kind of summary of the information on the page with all the important bits on. So stuff like structured data. And I think that's definitely going to be a big focus, but also stuff like how quickly it can get that structured data to its database, because if it takes ages for a page to load and it's not able to parse the right data, so any kind of crawling errors or anything to do with the rendering process not working, that's going to prohibit the kind of learning that's the machines are able to do. So I think that's really going to have to be a focus for people if they want to be included within these search results, because obviously there's going to be a lot of users using all of the summarization that kind of Google's providing with the generative search experience. But I think on the other side, you might also have, again, like page speed, because if Google can't see the content or anywhere it's not going to be able to be included, and you'll be missing out. If it can't summarize your data, you're not going to be included in the generative search results. So yeah, those two things I think are definitely going to be a lot more important.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned technical SEO being very prominent once it's released, because I completely agree. I think structured data is a key area for every brand that has a website, or at least that wants traffic from Google, right? When I think of brands, I think brands and technical SEO. I think the bigger the brand, the more technical issues they have, mainly because, and I'm sure you've probably experienced this as well, they tend to have CMSs that are either out of date and or it takes them a very long time to update it, right? So CMS optimization is not something that's very forefront within a lot of businesses. And in fact, a lot of brands tends to have a custom built CMS, which they will then have to update, right? In order to cater for stuff like schema markup and whatnot, and hreflangs implementation. Yet it seems as though Google is becoming a lot more brand focused, right? So my question is, if these big brands are struggling with their technical SEO and smaller brands are quicker to implement their technical changes, are we likely to see an increase in these smaller brands be more prominent in the SERPs?
I do think so, because of course with bigger scale comes more complexity, and the harder it is to kind of get stuff implemented and changed, especially if you've got thousands of pages or even millions. Whereas you're right, people with smaller sites, they'll be able to, I know a lot more CMSs are coming with inbuilt schema markup facilities, so people can quickly implement those stuff, especially on kind of out of the box CMSs or the smaller ones. But there is definitely so much added complexity when it comes to large sites, because it is custom coding. It's all of the, again, problems at scale that you have, stuff how the CMS is set up, any other technical debt that they've got across the site. But I think that's always been a challenge in technical SEO, like actually being able to sort out what you can and can't get done due to any kind of limitations that they've got on site. But that's where I feel like people working in technical SEO have a bit of a benefit there, because you're going to need to understand all of that background knowledge. You're going to need to speak to the developers and talk about what's actually feasible to implement, what's all of the guidelines of how to implement, what that looks like, and how to prioritize that, and what areas to prioritize. So I think that's going to be really important for those bigger players if they do want to be able to quickly move on these changes in a way that smaller businesses can quickly do, because there's just not as much to do, or they've got the tools that are able for them to do something at scale. It might not be as comprehensive, but I think that's where there is potential for smaller brands to kind of overtake the bigger names. But I think that's always the case. It's sometimes a lot easier when you're smaller to be nimble and quickly react to changes. Yeah. But then again, there's always it's not always the same. Sometimes in a bigger company, if you've got the resources behind you to do stuff at scale, because you might have access to the right talent, the right people, you can change your internal priorities to be able to push through things a little bit quicker. There's always kind of benefits and downsides of the other. But I think those people who are able to get that kind of thing implemented quickly and able to make it more comprehensive than what else is currently out there, I think those are the businesses that are really going to benefit when these changes are rolled out fully.
When you think of the driving force, let's say the most influential reason behind these changes Google's making. What do you think? What would you pin it down to? Is it a case of user demands? Is it a particular threat from AI, other search engines? What do you put it down to? Why Google's making these changes?
Yeah, I think they do align with what kind of Google want out of their business, which is to make it easy for people to find relevant, trustworthy information. But also, I think there is that added element of the threat from other companies being able to implement AI or put that kind of stuff through their site and service. For example, with Bing bringing out their version of their kind of like chat stuff, so it's really, I think they had a bit more pressure. I think maybe it might have been in the pipelines, but I think they've had to kind of jump in a little quicker than maybe that they would have wanted, because they need to be competitive in this space, and they don't want to kind of like lose market share, because that'll be less revenue for them. But at the same time, I think it must have been in the pipeline already, because it does kind of align with how they work and what they want. And they get the added bonus of, well, more people are spending time on the SERP pages, so we can increase our revenue through ads. And there's always money at the bottom of this, though.
Yeah, it's I think that right there, people spending more time on the SERPs it's a really interesting point, and it leads me into it's led me for a number of months now into comparing search and social. And I've been thinking about this for quite a while. And in my mind, there is a search element on social media platforms, right? And when I think of TikTok, the biggest at the moment, they are actively promoting or prompting people to search for certain things, right? And I'm seeing that social and search, they pretty much serve the same audience, right? And I'm thinking Google are most likely looking at social media platforms and saying they are a legit concern for us. And the more I thought about it, I realized I don't think other search engines are that big of a concern for Google, but I do think they are very concerned about social media, because if people are spending more time on social media and platforms, and social media platforms are prompting people to search on said platforms, it's a concern. So do you think social and search, the lines between the two are blurring?
I do think so. We've got such a people are using social media to search and to get recommendations, and I think you're right. It is a kind of a bit of a threat of a market share, because you do get these people which want to, get information in a different form. For example, related to the platform, you mentioned TikTok. It's prompting people to search within the platform. It's the short videos that people want to get information this way. People want hints and tips, and they're kind of on there for fun as well. Whereas I wouldn't say necessarily you'd be using Google for fun. Whereas maybe this is part of this search experience that they're, if we make it a bit more engaging. But I think this is why Google are looking into that kind of perspectives, which they talked about, which is where they're pulling in user-generated content to show actually you've got expertise in these areas. So let's pull in some videos and actually summarize that information, or at least push people to show that there is expertise on social media. So I think for businesses, having a video strategy is going to be important as well for brand, because you've got people who potentially would go from social and looking at some ideas who then might want to search online. And then you've also got the people where actually, if you're using Google in the first place to kind of, make a plan of where you want to visit in London, for example, for a trip, having that summary of videos that's able to go, again, it's pulling people off of the social channels into Google, if they're able to kind of get that information and summarize it and be able to show people within the SERPs that they're able to find social content, so they're not kind of missing out entirely. Whereas, yes, they will be spending a lot more time, on TikTok, and they've got their internal search. So there's, it does provide you with some anchor text for a particular search term relating to people. So I think the information kind of data behind stuff, like it understands what else people are searching on TikTok. And I think the understanding underneath is that actually using hashtags, location, periods, it's still those off-page technical signals that Google is using to be able to understand the video and be able to show it within the kind of perspectives tab or any kind of summarizing of content. So they're really going to have to, again, focus on those technical signals that you've got. And I think brands can't miss out if they're not on YouTube, they're not on TikTok, they're not on other channels that people use as a jumping off point for the searching and for that user journey. And you're missing out on a step if you've not got that.
Mm. I have also noticed an increase of offline traditional media, say Sky News, BBC, ITV, having a presence on social media platforms. TikTok and YouTube specifically. And I'm thinking, are we entering a world where we're virtually at the door of the battle of the verses? Google verse, Metaverse, heck, even Facebook now, right? They have their new AI device that they are launching next year. Are we going to have a case where we SEOs are no longer focusing on Google, and we're looking at all platforms as the way that people search? Do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a really complex area, really, because at what point do you stop? Especially, I think it's going to be more important for people who work across multi-channel campaigns. I think if you're in that, you're really going to have to push ideas from an SEO perspective to the different areas to be able to maximize the kind of potential you've got, because it's much easier to repurpose content and if you put that technical SEO underpinning through all of the different channels you've got and all that you might need to be visible on, then that will put you ahead a little bit more. But on the same time, I think sometimes it's just people are going to get overwhelmed with the kind of amount of platforms that people have got to think about. And I think actually sometimes if you've just got to drill down on one focus area, it might be easier to actually look at the, just SEO or just, so it's kind of in two hands. Either you've got to be an incredible generalist and push out all of the recommendations, thinking about multi-channel, thinking how something can apply, not just for one channel, but for every single one, but versus actually having super specialized knowledge. So you can actually go into recommendations for one thing. I know for us currently, I think we just have to be mindful of that. Actually, how could that work? And just give a few ideas to a client. I think that's really potentially helpful to them, because we can say, look, have you got some video content that we could talk about topics, or we've seen this search opportunity, and actually we've had a review on the SERPs, and actually they're showing lots of video. So here's the opportunity for you to create a video to actually fulfill that search intent, which we can't currently do on site. It's going to have to be a recommendation that you do with your internal team, for example. But I think for those people who can think multi-channel and just giving a few recommendations, I think that's going to be really important, because it does get people thinking about how it can apply to various different platforms and stops you kind of thinking in a silo.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things I'm looking forward to. I'm hoping that it takes SEO into other areas, i.e. other channels or other departments, teams, and keeps or prevents SEO from being siloed in just an SEO person, team, or department. If brands thought SEO was complex, what would they have to, what would we SEOs have to do to make it less complex in this new world that we seem to be headed into? Is it a case of we actually need to be educating people more on SEO, or is there a different way of ensuring that brands are more aligned or integrate SEO better with what they're doing?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big part, like that cross communication. I think it's always, once you kind of understand the concepts behind stuff, being able to communicate that well to your clients, to companies, to the stakeholders, to the people that you're going to need resource from. It's kind of always been important, but I think more so now, because especially if you've got multiple channels involved in stuff, you're going to have to be able to communicate it simply, so they understand how it relates to business goals. So again, trying to get anything technical implemented is always kind of hard, especially if the client doesn't understand. So being able to be really good at communicating what it means, kind of taking the jargon out, making it simple to understand that anyone would be able to, as well as having the skill to tailor that message to who you're speaking to. So, the CMO is going to want a completely different type of, they just want a one pager that tells you what they need and how it's going to be relating to the business. Whereas other members, people on the content team might need a bit more in-depth information. But I think this has always been a challenge, kind of communicating the SEO benefit to clients, I think, throughout. So I think anyone who's able to kind of improve their communication skills and just kind of take that complexity out of it, or just make it really transparent about what decisions go into, why you're recommending stuff, so people can just grasp immediately. It's like the why and the how and the how much. I think those are the kind of three key things. If you can communicate that simply with, using actual revenue increase or, decrease if you're trying to say, please don't do this. I think the communication aspect of SEO is going to become far more important, especially when, like you said, everything might get more complex and you're adding multiple channels to everything. Marketing managers internally have got to juggle 5 different demands from different areas of the business into one area. So, yeah, I think that's really if you want to be more successful, I think as an SEO, really zooming in on those communication skills is going to be super important.
It seems as though us SEOs, out of all the different marketing channels, I would say we have the hardest time communicating to business leaders. Do you have a theory around why we as a community struggle around this?
I think it's when you're working in something day to day, complex stuff doesn't feel complex anymore. And you forget that when you're communicating people outside of the industry, that some of these terms mean absolutely nothing to anyone. So it's stuff like canonicals, you can talk about that, but if somebody doesn't understand that concept, again, coming back to that education piece. So it's always been really important to be able to actually educate a client on what stuff means, why it's important. But on that kind of, it's definitely always been a challenge because, again, we know what we mean, but if you don't know, it's sometimes hard to extract yourself from that knowledge. That's why I think it's really useful to send it to send stuff to people that don't really understand the stuff and be like, what's not clear, what doesn't make any sense. So you can kind of review that and just make sure like you said, you've communicated the main points, which is what they need to do, why we're recommending it, and the benefits, for example, because it's always going to be complex, and the more we can do to reduce that complexity, the more we can do to help the client understand, and they're really going to benefit you as an SEO in general, but I think specifically for technical SEO, because trying to make a technical recommendation simple is always going to be hard. And that's why I think definitely when it comes to AI, people might be worried about, how tools are going to make our job obsolete. But I think a machine cannot make technical SEO. They can't prioritize it. They can't explain it well to a client when they don't have any knowledge, and they're not going to be able to, synthesize every kind of piece of information you have about their site, their setup. Being able to make recommendations based off of that is really, really hard. So I think definitely to be able to get ahead and do a better job as an SEO, because you can make all the best recommendations in the world, but if they don't get implemented and you don't nothing happens, you can't clients lose interest, you might get dropped, but yeah, if you can't execute, it's there's no point doing the work. So yeah, I think it's always going to be important, but I think when everything in the future becomes a lot more technical and there's a lot more considerations behind that, those communication skills are really going to help anyone who wants to actually get stuff done.
Totally agree. I think with the increase in CMSs carrying out a lot of the technical, or doing a lot of the technical SEO heavy lifting, it's going to be even more important for SEOs to have their communication skills and storytelling skills as high as possible, because the bar I think is only going to increase. The more complex SEO gets, the more the bar raises. Technical SEOs these days are a lot better than technical SEOs, let's say, even 5 years ago. So a technical SEO executive today, in theory, is a lot better than a technical SEO executive of 5-6+ years ago. And I think it's only going to get better as SEO becomes more complex. Sophie, StudioHawk. Tell me about StudioHawk, please.
Oh yeah, so we're an Australian company, but we have an office here in London. So we're an SEO only agency. So what we do is that's all we focus on. We don't look at other channels. Obviously, we do like to give recommendations where we can about how to use kind of like that video content, but we just try and focus on SEO. So because sometimes you can get lost in the weeds and spread yourselves too thin trying to do everything all at once. So we do one thing, we do it really well. We do everything from audits, general campaigns. We look at help with migrations, site speed optimizations, and all those kind of things. So, and there's a lot of us here. So there's 8 people in the office here in London. And yeah, we're having a really good time doing stuff. Like I said, we love audits. Well, I do personally love audits. So yeah, if there's any kind of issues that have with your site, or you just want to see what could be possible with a bit of dedication and being able to communicate that information to the people who need that sign off, etc. Yeah, so we like to really focus just on one thing.
When you think of stakeholders who are succeeding in the SERPs versus those who, let's say, struggle from a technical SEO point of view, what would you put it down to between those who succeed and those who are not quite there yet?
I think it definitely comes down to that communication and being able to implement, because you can come up with the most incredible strategy, but if you can't update pages, if you can't change fundamental things for technical SEO, if you don't have the internal buy-in to actually get SEO tasks completed, if you don't have an advocate internally to be able to get stuff done, I think those are really key things when it comes to kind of roadblocks there.
I have a phrase that I want to get your thoughts on or reaction on. It takes more than SEOs to make SEO a success. What does that evoke when you hear it?
I'm like 100% yes. You need you need to be able to get stuff done. And if to get those things done, you're going to need to speak to so many different people. You're going to need help from developers. You're going to need help from, like I said, those internal people who can advocate for you. You need to be able to communicate SEO to the C-suites to actually get buy-in and get budget to get those things implemented, because there's no way, you can come up with a massive audit or with all the technical things that you need to get done, but without that justification or that business case, it's really hard to convince other people to actually give you the resourcing. So having advocates in many different places is really useful. And again, supported by developers, supported by content writers, supported by the social team to be able to share the content that you've written. Getting all of those moving parts working together is a kind of a key reason why SEOs can get stuff done and actually get the results that people need. But if it's just you recommending stuff to an internal team or who doesn't understand the value, don't have the time to implement things, don't have the internal advocacy, they don't have the people to be able to manage the projects, everything just falls apart and you can't get anything done. And if there's no results, there's no point.
When I think of advocacy and having someone very much pushing SEO internally, I think of education, i.e. advocacy for non-SEOs to, if you like, improve their awareness of SEO. Do you think SEO education for non-SEOs will be an area that a lot of agencies focus on as we get more complex in SEO?
I think so. Just every step of the kind of marketing journey needs to have that underpinning of the SEO to be able to be successful and to actually get the best benefit, because if you're doing stuff for just one channel, it's just that one channel. But if you can underpin everything with multi-channel thinking behind it, it's good for, topics that are good for like internal stuff, topics that are going to be good for SEO are probably also going to be good for social, again, because of that generative search crossover. So being able to get other disciplines to be able to understand just the core concepts, I think, you can go really, really deep, but actually the people that might not need it, you've really got to focus on what do people need to know to be able to do their kind of job better, or to do their job without actually having to add in a lot of consulting on the side. So for content people, how to make an effective layout, how to write a title tag. Those are going to be like things that they'll need to know, keep it top level, keep it simple. For people like developers, if you want to talk about, you're going to talk about the importance of various factors that go into technical SEO, what can make or break a website, those kind of issues, so they understand like what to do, what not to do, what stuff they might need to consult you on, having that knowledge, because they always say, you can't, if you don't know, you can't ask about it. So being able to, so people can actually foresee problems and they can come up to you proactively. But I think, you do need that foundation level of kind of training, or just being able to communicate some key concepts to the various people that you will be working close with that actually do affect your remit or your role. So it's, again, those people that are managing the CMS and they're uploading stuff, and they're the ones who create the URL. Do they know about redirects? Do they know that they need to add something? So I think helping and contributing to how the internal teams work and helping them with their processes, to, again, make sure that SEO is kind of weaved in throughout the whole process. So you don't have to constantly, go in all of the time to kind of fix stuff, that actually just through helping them improve their internal process and actually giving them a little bit of education as to why it matters and what it does, then that can really, really help a business actually, really fly. And because you've already got that implementation and that SEO thinking behind everything. And that obviously matters a lot more at scale.
Yeah. I'm maybe a year or so ago, I had a post on my site talking about the difference maker between those who succeed and those who struggle in SEO comes down to how a brand is able to implement changes quickly. And as someone who's worked client side, I've seen the internal issues, and there are loads of internal issues. And I find that I put it down to the way brands, business leaders think about SEO, and that comes from SEO. So the typical business leader, if I were to just give a very quick example, they will think of SEO in terms of keywords, links, and rankings. Of course, SEO is a lot more complex than that, right? And to add to that, they'll think of SEO as this black magic, dark art sort of thing. And I reckon it's because of this thinking that they have SEO in a silo, and almost are not necessarily sure of how to incorporate SEO into their existing process. But I put this down to SEOs. I think it's down to us, because they think, the way they think about SEO is down to the way we've educated them over the years. So what sort of changes do you think we should be making? Do you think it's a case of, okay, we need seminar upon seminar, let's say once every quarter or so, around quote unquote new SEO? Or is it a case of this is something that will have to be on a gradual basis, and over the course of, I don't know, let's say 5 years, the thinking of SEO will be a lot more updated?
Yeah, I think it will be really education, I think, is going to be a big part. But I think to really get down to it, I think it's when you're first communicating to a client, really being able to say, who am I going to be working with? We need to speak to this type of person who can handle, who is there on the marketing team, who are going to look at it. Do I need to sit in the product section? Because actually we need to do lots of technical SEO. I'm going to need a lot of you talking to developers a lot more. Does it make sense for you to fit that? So it's thinking about what work do you need to get done, and where would use an SEO best sit? But I think sometimes people don't talk to the client enough at the beginning to kind of get an understanding of exactly how they work. So you can recommend where best you would be sitting to actually make that difference. But I do think in terms of education, yes, I think it's always going to be important. Whilst, yes, it does get more complex, I think people might just get confused. People's idea of SEO could be outdated because, if you're very busy, you're probably not there to get up on the, all of the latest knowledge. So I think that's always going to be hard though, because everyone's good. While there might be a lot more information out there and available to find, people internally might not have the time.
Yeah. Totally agree. Sophie, thank you so much for your time today. Is there anything you'd like to promote or shout out?
That's a difficult one. So I would.
What is the StudioHawk website?
Yeah, so you can find us at StudioHawk.co.uk. Like I mentioned earlier, we do SEO campaigns, we do technical audits, we do migration recoveries, we do e-commerce SEO, and we work with loads of businesses. We usually specialise in SMEs. So if anyone's a retailer who's looking to implement an SEO strategy, come speak to us.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Sophie. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Have a brilliant day, and we'll catch up again another time.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Bye now.